Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here today. I wanted to welcome my new followers. We're really getting up there in the ranks right now, so thank you for following me. And I just pray that these videos would encourage you in your walk with the Lord, and also that you would just really feel confident to seek His face during this season. And as we're entering into a new year, 2021, that this year you would just find a new strength in the Lord and a new hunger and thirst for His word. That's really just my heart's desire through these videos, that you would come to a closer and deeper walk with the Lord. With that said, I wanted to talk about something a little bit different today. Really just trying to put out videos where I feel like the Lord is leading me or teaching me, or things that He lays on my heart. So just going into this new year, I've been doing like reflecting and just asking God like what I can do to really grow. And one of the things that was laid on my heart is just to share something that I've learned in relationships, and something that I've really tried to implement this past year, and that is just understanding what my love languages are. If you haven't read the book about the 5 love languages, I'd really recommend that you get that book and that you study through it for yourself. And I wanted to kind of just share a story about just my past, and also a past relationship that I had, and just kind of like figuring out what my love languages are, and kind of the struggles that I've had with that in past relationships. So when I first started dating, and I think I read the 5 love languages book, probably I want to say like in my early 20s. Someone I think gave it to me, and initially what I thought was my love language before I read the book was quality time. And I was in a relationship where I got a lot of quality time, and it was very evident to me after that relationship that while quality time is important to me, it's not like a top love language for me. One of the things that I quickly learned in why I wanted to talk about why it's important to understand your love language, because you can begin to feel really unloved or unfulfilled in a relationship where the other person doesn't know what your love language is. And you can also be confused about what your love language is, and you can maybe be confused about why you're not connecting with someone, or why your relationship isn't really growing. So I think that's why it's important to know what your love language is, so that way you can articulate to that person, hey, this is what matters to me. Hey, this is the way that I kind of get filled in this relationship. And it's important so you can communicate to that other person, but it's also important for you to communicate to the person that you're dating, so that you can understand what's important to them. In the 5 love languages book, it talks about how we're raised has a very big impact on what our love language is. That's not always the case, but if you grew up in a family where everyone was getting gifts, and your dad comes home and he gives you a gift, then a lot of times you're more inclined to really treasuring someone giving you a gift. Or if you grew up in a home where your mom would like clean the house and get it all ready for whatever, and she just did things for you, then you may be one where acts of service is something where it really means a lot to you. So just kind of reflecting on how you were raised, and really what your family implemented as an important love language and just kind of reflecting on really what matters to you in a relationship. And that kind of goes into the relationship that I wanted to talk about, where I was in a relationship with a guy who his two main love languages of how he showed them were gifts and acts of service, and I would say closely followed would be quality time. So those were his top three. And I think it's important, like as a side note, you can show love languages, but you can receive them differently. For instance, I've noticed about myself, I really like to give gifts, but that isn't how I receive a love language. But I would say that's definitely one of my love languages that I like to do for people, but that is definitely not one that I like to receive. So it's a weird dynamic because it's good to know, like, okay, this is a way I like to give love, but that's not necessarily the way that I get filled. So just to kind of be aware of that. So back to the story. So in this dating relationship, he would always, like, every time he came to see me, he would usually have a gift for me. And it wasn't like something huge, but it was just something that was well thought out and very considerate. But it was interesting because I would not really get excited about it. Like, I tried to show appreciation because I knew, like, that was how he showed his love language, but it became to be kind of a problem in our relationship because like, when he would greet me at like, say we had been apart and he'd come to my place or I would come visit him, the very first part of our interaction, he would go straight into telling me about his day, or he would go straight into telling me about some frustrations that he had. And like, I came from a family where as soon as you greet someone, first of all, you hug them, you tell them how much, like, you missed each other, you usually, like, compliment each other. And for me, I realized very quickly that upon being greeted by this person and he's going straight into, like, his day, I began to feel really unappreciated. I began to feel like, well, maybe he's not excited to see me. Maybe he, doesn't care about, like, how I look, or doesn't care about, like, just that embrace of a hug. And so I, like, confronted him about it, and he, like, for him, that connection just wasn't there. Like, that's not how he was taught how to greet someone. And so that was kind of like the first indicator to me, like, how you're raised can have a really big impact on how you expect to receive love from someone, and how you can kind of have a disconnect with someone if they're not kind of meeting you where your love language is at. So the reason why I bring that story up is for you as a single. I wanted to hit a couple points. The first point being is to just be aware of what your love languages are. And really, if you're not aware, start writing down things like that people do that matter to you. So that way you can kind of have an idea, okay, well, this matters to me and this doesn't matter to me. And you can kind of gather more of what it is. And I think it's really important going into a relationship because maybe you have, like, this frustration and you're not really sure why you have that frustration. And so to be able to pinpoint, I'm feeling like this is a love language, this is an area in my life where it's just not being met in this particular relationship. Secondly, I feel like it's really important to know what your love language is, so that way you can communicate it to somebody else, and that way they know how to meet you where you need to be met in order to feel fulfilled in a relationship. And it's so important because you can begin to feel empty in a relationship if your spouse or your potential spouse doesn't know how to fill in that area of love. And I see a lot of marriages that struggle a lot because someone in the relationship is really, really trying, like really pushing in their love language, but the spouse just doesn't feel love because they're not being met in their love language. And so to know that as a single and be able to communicate that to a potential spouse, I believe is such a leg up as far as being able to meet someone where they are, and to be willing to see, like, is that person able to love me in that way? And back to that relationship, it was just evident to me that that person was never going to be able to meet me in my love language. And that was a really sad thing, because that's the third point that I wanted to bring up is, so once you know what your love language is, you've clearly communicated it, like that's what you need. And 3 is then to kind of watch that person and see if they can meet you there. And they're not going to be perfect, especially if you have grown up a certain way. It's going to be really hard to maybe love someone where their love language is at. For instance, I am not an acts of service person. I'm very, well, I'm like the oldest child. My job is like a leadership position. And so for me, I'm very self-sufficient. Like, I don't like it when someone does something for me. I'm very much like, I'll get it done myself type of person. But a lot of people are an acts of service person. They like it when someone does something for them. And so, but even though that's not my love language, if I am with someone where their love language is acts of service, I have to be willing to do something for that person. I have to be willing to maybe clean the house or fold laundry or cook dinner for them, whatever it is that I can do specifically to show that person, like, hey, I'm doing this act of service for you because I know that it matters to you, even though it's not something that matters to me. Because I know that's how you feel love, I'm going to die to myself and love you in that way because I know it matters to you. And I think that's what is really, really important. Like, point 3 is so important in a dating relationship, because one, you need to see, like, can I love that person in their love language? Like, can I die to myself and be willing to love them in the area where they feel loved? And if you're not able to do that, like if it's just to the point where it feels super uncomfortable for you, or it's just not an area where maybe you're mature enough to love that person in that way, then you really need to just let that relationship go. Like, it's not going to be a relationship where you feel like filled. It's not going to be a relationship where you feel happy. And not that your relationship is always going to be happy. Like, it's not always feelings. I don't want you to like get the wrong idea of what I'm saying. But I do think to be fully flourishing in a relationship, we have to be willing to die to ourselves and love that person where they feel loved. So I think that is so important. And then for you to be able to see, like, is that person willing to meet me in my love language? And if that person is not willing to meet you, then I would say it would be wise to just step away from that relationship. Am I saying like never allow it back in? I'm not saying that, but I am saying if they're not willing to meet you where you are needing to be met, I just don't think you would be happy in that relationship. And I mean, obviously there's marriages where people have opposite love languages and they like work it out. But as a single, you really have that opportunity to sift through those things. Like, once you're married, you are married. Like, you got to work through that together. But as a single, you can walk away from things. You can be like, okay, well, this was a good relationship and I learned a lot from it, but it's just not what I see in my future. And it's just hard. Like, this is kind of a hard video for me because I learned a lot about myself and what my love languages are, and it was hard because I think we can kind of make excuses a lot of times when we want a relationship really bad. Like we can kind of be like, "Oh, well, at least they're trying, at least they're loving me in their love language." But if that person isn't willing to die to themselves and really try to meet you in the area where you have communicated to them what you need, it's really like a selfish love at that point that they're giving to you. And I think it can be dangerous continuing in a relationship where the person that you are planning to marry is only loving you in their love. And you can pray about it. Like, obviously, I'm just giving like my own perspective, and I would say definitely pray about what I'm saying. But just for me personally, it is such a beautiful thing to see people trying to love and trying to work towards meeting that person where they need to be met in a relationship. And I don't know, I think that as you pray about it and as you consider really what is my love language, the Lord is going to give you more confidence going into a relationship. He's going to just give you the courage to speak to someone and clearly define, like, hey, this is kind of what I need. I think especially as females, we can be vague, and I don't want anyone to be vague. Like, you need to clearly communicate to someone like what it is that you're expecting, what it is that you need in a relationship. And as we're honest with each other, I feel like that is how a relationship grows and blossoms, is we don't hide what we truly need. I think sometimes you can put on like almost like a facade of, oh, I don't need something from someone else, or I don't want something from someone else, or there's just different ways that we put on like this fake face. And really, a fake face is going to hurt you in the end. If you're planning to marry someone, if you're planning to grow with someone, they need to know who you really are. They need to know really truly what's important, and you need to lay everything out. I'm not saying everything out on the first date, but as you're getting to know someone and you're going through that courtship relationship, you really need to clearly lay out the type of person that you are, and you really need to be honest with yourself about the person that you're with, their love languages. Can you meet them where they're at? Can you be affectionate? I know some women who are very just to themselves, they're not affectionate, and their husbands are affectionate. And I think the most loving thing you can do in that is to die to yourself and ask that person, like, what is it that you need from me? Is it a hug? Is it a scratch on the back? Is it, just holding your hand in public? Whatever it is, whatever they communicate to you, try to implement that. Try to listen when you ask a question about a potential spouse and what they need. Actually listen. Don't just hear what they say and then do the exact opposite. It's crazy to me, and when someone asks about a love language and they hear it and then they're like, okay, well, even though you told me that, I'm gonna still love you in my love language. And it's like, well, why did you even ask the question if you're not gonna try to implement it? And I think truly, when you're asking someone what their love language is and what's important to them, to write it down. I mean, write it down so you don't forget. And then ask the Lord to help you implement that. And if you can't, if it's just really truly too out of character for you, then the most loving thing you can do is walk away from that relationship, because they just deserve to be loved in that type of love. Like, that's where they are met. And obviously prayerfully consider it. Prayerfully consider, like, am I just being selfish, not showing that person that love language? Am I just being prideful? Because a lot of times pride and selfishness can really take us away from maybe a really great relationship. So really, I would say pray and fast before you make such a big decision. Ask the Lord to really clarify in your heart, like, is this what the Lord has for me, or is it something that I need to walk away from? And so this video was really just on my heart to make. I know it's kind of a lot and maybe I went on a lot of rabbit trails. So hopefully you're able to stick with me through it and you have some things maybe to think about going into the new year, about just really figuring out what it is that's important to you in a relationship and how you feel loved and how you can show love to even maybe someone you're dating right now. And hopefully this encourages you and helps you in your next relationship or even a relationship that you're in now. And I hope that your day is blessed.